freedom just begun, living large under the sun.
Hello, and welcome to the SmartMAI Consulting Edge Podcast, where we speak with experienced consultants, advisors, business leaders about how they solve difficult problems and guide organizations through change and create measurable results and sustainable growth. I'm your host, Dan Mulberry. The title of today's episode is Cutting Through the AI Noise, Turning Technology into Business Value. So AI has created enormous excitement in the business world, obviously, but it's also created a lot of confusion. Executives are surrounded by competing platforms, ambitious promises, technical terminology, and constant pressure, of course, to move quickly. At the same time, technology companies face a related challenge. They may have a capable product, but struggle to explain why it matters, who needs it, and how it produces measurable value. Well, our guest today works at the intersection of those issues. David Flesch is the founder of DCF Consults, where he advises organizations on AI, strategic marketing, go-to-market planning, product positioning, messaging, and enterprise service management. David began his career in technology and product management before moving into product marketing. The combination allows him to understand how technology works while translating its capabilities into language that executives, customers, and investors can understand. Invaluable talent, by the way. His consulting philosophy is deliberately straightforward. Clear communication, strategic execution, respect for clients' time, and what he calls a no BS approach. David, I love it. Welcome to the Consulting Edge Podcast.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here.
Well, tell us a little about how you begin your career on the tech side before moving into the product management and product marketing. How did that progression happen?
Yeah, I started off early days of tech and at a software company that was actually in the consumer space. I started off doing customer support, and through just a bunch of opportunities in that company, was able to work my way up into a point where I joined the product management team. I took over a bit of a struggling product. We got it turned around, had a great development team that I worked with, and we got it turned around and made it profitable. And that really just kind of launched my career as, on the product management, product marketing side. So over time, I worked at a number of tech companies, launched quite a few products, most of them in the IT management space. And as I kind of worked through my career, went through a number of acquisitions and fun things like that, and I ended up on the marketing side of it, which was interesting because it really allowed me to take the work that I had done on defining products, understanding the technology, and translate that into the words that somebody would actually understand, right? What it is, what it does. You can take great engineers, they can do fantastic things. But for me, the magic always is being able to take that and put it into very human language so that people understand why would they care. That's kind of my approach is we can have great technology, but if somebody doesn't understand why they should care, what are you going to do with it, right? It's just cool stuff that nobody's going to use.
Exactly. And to that point, and this question is based kind of on the old cartoon that I think everyone's seen with the business requirements, what the developer did, what they tested, and then they end up with a tree with a swing that goes through the middle of the tree. I think we've all seen that one. So what did working directly with the technical teams teach you about that gap between how a product's built and how customers understand its value?
Yeah. Again, I've had this opportunity to work with some really great technologists who are doing some front of the line kind of work. One of the things that always amazed me at the time was, talking to these guys that were just brilliant, whether they were doing, data models, creating kind of the next generation of solutions for managing complex infrastructures. And, talk to some of these guys and it'd be like, well, how does somebody actually manage this, right? You've created this amazing technology, but how does somebody use it? Oh, well, what do you mean? Well, somebody has to be able to actually go in and, figure out what do they click? What do they, what dial do they turn, right? It has to be easy as possible for somebody to get in there and do their job. Oh, well, I guess I didn't think about that. So what I really found was my relationship had to be one of bringing the customer first to the technologist so that as they were going through what they were thinking about, which was always how to solve problems, but not necessarily with the person in front of it, right? So they were thinking about how they could get behind the programming interface, create this great technology. How a human actually worked with it, maybe not so much, right? And of course that varies, but a lot of the conversations I had were, what do you mean? How does somebody actually come in here and use this? And how do we make it easier for them? And so that, really taught me about putting customers first, clients first, talking to them, understanding what are the problems they're trying to solve, and how can we apply technology, kind of the whole gamut of technology that's available in ways that will help them solve these problems.
Yeah, exactly. And that, by the way, is a gap that I see in AI still. The technical teams are focused on what model they're using, how to prompt it, how to put things together, the technical infrastructure, and some of the capabilities. The business leaders are trying to solve problems. So that's a gap that has to be bridged. And it sounds like you spend a lot of time doing that.
Right. Yeah. And I think, the AI has created tons of opportunities. I think we should just put that on the table, and it's improving every day in terms of what it's able to do. I think what it's really done that I've observed is it's made it much easier for people to communicate with the AI on the back end. I've been doing AI with the solutions that I've been, delivering to market from the vendors I've worked with for quite a while, right? And let's face it, when we first brought AI to market, it was very complicated. Took, really a scientist on the back end, right, to make it work. And even as people were implementing kind of the first generation of agents and, hoping to be able to drive great experiences, AI wasn't there yet, right? It was really generative AI that brought that kind of ability to communicate in human ways and to be able to start allowing people to have more access to the data in their environment to simplify the work that they're doing. It doesn't solve everything though, right? It has limitations. And so, the big thing is talking to folks about what are you actually trying to solve? And then, hey, if there's an application for AI, great. But if AI is just adding complexity to a solution that there's already an easy approach to, well, hey, let's do that, right? Let's really look at how do we do things in ways that are going to drive real value, do it quickly, and, leverage AI where possible.
So let's talk about how you work with your clients a little bit. So in terms of translating technology into business value, what I've seen out there, and I think what gives you the opportunity to have your practice, is that tech companies describe products, again, through their features, their architecture, integrations. How do you, when you work with a vendor, how do you translate those details into a compelling business story? Is there a framework that you use to approach that?
Yes, and again, being able to leverage my background on kind of the product and the marketing side helps, right? It helps cut through some of the noise. And then also, my experience where the lanes that I swim in, right, are marketing, because that's where I've spent a lot of time working with product teams, distilling messages, making things make sense. But also on the IT side, right? So I've done a lot of work with CIOs, with IT leaders. And, it's funny because the folks that are often leading IT are the ones that are the most skeptical about what this new technology brings because they've lived through it, right? And we've gone through radical changes in the industry before. And, we've seen a lot of that, right? I remember when we went from on-premises solutions to in the cloud SaaS solutions, right? And that was a huge transformation in the marketplace, and it really changed the financials for people that were investing. But, technologists, the people that are driving the technology within their organizations, the things that they're really responsible for are compliance, it's government regulations, it's privacy, it's keeping their customer client data secure, and then it's driving the business forward, being able to meet the needs of that business and leverage technology to drive value for the organization. And that's a tough place to be in for IT organizations, often because they're dealing with very restrictive budgets. So for me, talking to IT leaders, a lot of it is what kind of real benefits can we see? What kind of real benefits can be applied? And then how would you use those benefits, right? It's getting them to think about how they can improve the way that they're delivering services to their clients, which is the business, and do that by driving improvements into their organization and efficiencies. And that's where AI, again, comes in, and it can play a role. Vendors promise a lot of stuff and benefits from AI. Are we seeing all of that? Not necessarily, but there are ways that it can be applied to drive real value.
So you mentioned a few things already, but are there other questions that a company should ask when they're developing an effective positioning and messaging? Like, should they ask about the ideal customer, what their most urgent problem is? What other questions should be asked?
Oh, you really need to know the customer, right? Your client, and how they show up. And so when you think about enterprise buyers, which is the area that I've spent most of my career in, there's a lot of people that are involved in buying decisions. And, you need to understand, what does your ideal customer profile look like? Who are the people that really are going to go out and get benefit from the solution you're offering, so that you're targeting your resources at them. And more importantly, you're understanding that buyer. And, a big part of what we talk about is the buyer's journey. How do they go get information? Do they like to do things through self-service? Do they like to do it through communities? Do they like to do it with vendors, but do it, being able to access resources on their own? How do they get through that funnel to a point where maybe they're ready to start having a conversation with a vendor? And what we've seen is those buyer dynamics change, where people typically don't like to talk to vendors. They don't want to talk to somebody in the sales organization until much further into that journey, right? So it's really important to understand what's the information they're looking for, how do they consume that information, and make it easy for them to be able to.
Makes sense. So, there's obviously a hype cycle around AI, and there's a breadth of different perceptions and opinions on it, everything from adamant evangelists to complete skeptics. Credibility has to come into play with AI. What makes an AI value proposition credible versus just simply sounding impressive and really being hype?
Right. I think that the thing that's really important is to get through the hype, get through the noise, and get focused on what's the customer trying to solve, right? And the way that a lot of organizations are, and especially the big hyperscale vendors, are approaching the engagements with their clients is, hey, we've got AI, it can solve all your problems. What do you want to do, right? Which a lot of organizations are going through that art of the possible, right? They're making board level decisions on how much they're going to invest in. But, in the trenches, probably where you're operating, certainly where I am operating, Dan, the conversation has to be much more pointed. How do you plan on using AI? Where is your problems? When I'm talking to clients on the product marketing side, a lot of the conversations we're having is, how do we inject AI into that marketing funnel, that buyer's journey we talked about, right? How can we use AI to be able to deliver better information faster, where their client's going to consume it? AI plays a huge role in that, or can play a huge role in that. But it's really a very specific type of use cases that we can come in, prescribe different parts of the funnel where they can layer in AI. They can then make the decisions on where they're going to make investments, because let's face it, it all has cost associated with it, and go ahead and implement and do it all with a budget in mind, a goal in mind, and a time frame in mind, right? These shouldn't be open-ended projects. They should be, what can we do in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, so that you can see some success, and then you can start building on that.
That makes perfect sense. I think another real important factor that people have to decide, they have to get rid of this concept that AI is just going to automate everything. There's a balance of human and AI both implementation and validation of what's going on with the AI. And I think a very important decision when people are deploying AI is understanding what that balance is and defining what the AI is responsible for and what the human's still responsible for, with the goal to elevate the human's performance and augment what they do, not necessarily replace it.
That's right. Yeah, human in the loop is critical. That's a big part of the conversations, right? Is what do the people do, and are we, replacing people? And the reality is that when you really want to get great results with AI, you've got to have great people there working with it. Doesn't come on board and understand your business and understand what you're trying to do. And it's having the people there that are knowledgeable, that have done the work, and that can really help the AI become more and more efficient. And what it does is it just drives better and better results for the people that are working with it. I look at AI as a great assistant, right? As a great enabler of making humans able to do more and be able to do more quickly, more effectively in some cases, right? And we just really need to focus on that. And that gives me a lot of hope, because it does give the user the ability to get better information than they've ever had before, right? AI can get in and query data that's been kind of this, black box of data. AI can go in there and start bringing things together and make sense of it, right? That adds value for business leaders. AI can consume a lot of data and information that you might have about a client, and that can help automate your sales flow for your sellers. And it can certainly understand and go out and read Reddit forums and technology posts and all those kinds of things, and bring together information so that as you're writing collateral, right, you're able to get a much bigger perspective. AI can help with all of that. What it's not understanding is, what are the questions to ask, right? Is this really the right message? Does this really convey what we're trying to accomplish as an organization? And that's, the people are important.
So to that point, when you're working with a company and they're struggling with how to develop the proper messaging about their products, are there any warning signs out there, or I guess yellow flags, that maybe they develop their messaging without enough input from their actual customers?
Yeah, I think really I would say it's going back to that ICP, right? And understanding who is your customer, right? And because everybody wants to grow. And so in my experiences, there's always kind of this, who's actually your customer? Who's your buyer? What are they doing? And, if you've got customers, talk to them, right? They're the best folks to figure out what actually makes your products interesting and compelling to those customers, right? And that's the best feedback you're ever going to get. Then you start to see that expand, right? Well, we don't want just customers that are, in organizations that are 500 employees. That's our sweet spot today, but we want to grow into, gigantic organizations. So what I see is that ICP is not well understood and we're well focused. And so you start building messaging for everybody, right? The easiest thing is, we don't want to leave anybody out. The problem with that is, when you build messaging for everybody, you build messaging for nobody, right? Nobody knows, when should I look at that? Is that targeting me, or is it targeting somebody else who's doing something entirely different? So as you start getting focused on what's your customer actually look like, what are the problems that they're having, what are the words that they use, how do they talk about things, where do they talk about things, that's critical. And then you're creating messaging that's very focused. So, the answer to your question is, yeah, absolutely. They don't spend enough time talking to their customers. They haven't gotten that focus. And, it just leads to investment on the marketing side that just doesn't turn into results.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the prior question, a comment you made about the AI learning in an organization. That's a critical point. I think some people have the impression that because these models have been trained on trillions of tokens and have all of this ingested information that they use to build their logic and their content, that it's going to know everything. But to me, it's just like hiring a new employee. The more that person knows about your industry, your business, your clients, and how you operate, the better it's going to be in its performance. And AI is the same thing to me. Let's move on to the actual go-to-market strategy that you work with your clients on. Sometimes it seems like product marketing creates launch materials or sales presentations. How do you define its broader strategic role? What does product marketing, what's their role in that go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, in my experience in the companies that I've worked for, product marketing has played really the key strategic role, right? When you look at how product marketing fits into the organization, right? They become really the liaison between the product team, right? The people that are creating the products, developing the products, and the rest of the organization and the client and the customers, right? And so they really need to be able to, again, take technical information, distill it into the value propositions, the messages. They need to be able to understand what the roadmap looks like, ideally, years out, not just quarters out, but really be able to understand where the market's going, understand the addressable market. How is that changing, right? We've seen, obviously AI has radically changed markets. And then take that and then building a go-to-market strategy, not just for the immediate, but for long term, right? Looking out, right? As that roadmap changes, what's the go-to-market strategy? How does that change? Are we opening doors for new types of customers? How do we attract them? And so really it's that strategic outlook. And then it's also putting together the strategy for an annual plan, right? And adjusting that as you go through the year. Product marketing, in my experience, has really been kind of the starting point for putting together that go-to-market plan. And that is, again, working with the product teams, understanding what's coming out, the release cycle. It's working with the sales team, understanding what they're hearing, what's working for them, what's not working for them. And then, of course, working for your partners in the campaigns team, the website, and all of the other parts of the marketing organization. So they understand what's coming, where will they be investing, how do they invest in driving the growth for that part of the business. So, yeah, it's a very strategic role. It should be a very strategic role in an organization when it's done right. And, there's a lot of pressure on product marketing to be the content creation part of the organization, right? Create the slides for the sales team, come up with the next round of enablement. We've got continuous releases going on, so it can become very tactical. And that's a part of the job, but really where product marketing breaks out and can change the trajectory for the organization is to have that strategic hat on.
Makes sense. So I talked to a lot of my guests about alignment within the organizations they work with, and this is an example, just like many other areas where different parts of the organization have to be aligned to achieve success. How do you ensure that alignment between the product team, the sales team, marketing, the customer success team, to ensure that you've got a go-to-market strategy that's going to work?
It's, it depends on the organization to be certain, but, it's a great place to start that I've found is, you go into organizations and there's different types of conversations. And some of them, the product marketing team might be well positioned. People look at it, they go to it as a source. And what they're really looking at is how do we modernize with AI? Other organizations I go in and it's looked at, again, product marketing is creating content for us. They're that resource that's there to answer questions when somebody has, a sales rep has a question. I'm not really looking at them as a strategic value add, and certainly not looking at, all of those different parts of, messaging, understanding the customer, and all of those things. And so in those organizations, what I often find is there's not an understanding of what product marketing really can be doing. And so you want to start there with, simple roles and responsibilities, get that communicated out to leadership. And that can be a transformative for a company, right? It's like, hey, we see a new way of working with product marketing, or maybe we don't. We just want them to continue in the role that we've had them in. That's a business's decision to make, right? The question is then who's doing that other work?
So let me take it kind of up a level or zoom out a little bit. So there are a lot of strong products technically, a lot of technically strong products out there, but they have weak launches. In your experience, are there certain things that typically cause that? I mean, we've talked about a lot of things that obviously would contribute that if they don't follow those disciplines you're talking about and take those things into effect. But what's the most common cause that you're seeing out there?
It's interesting. I've been at companies where we've had very well-established launch cadences, so people knew when to expect twice yearly, and people knew when to expect a launch, and it became an event, right? It was a marketing event. It was not had nothing to do with when actual product was released. That got released throughout the year. This was an opportunity to come and make noise in the market, really, if you will, right? What I see companies struggling with now is the continuous release cycles that AI is empowering the development teams to move more and more towards, right? AI is really helping developers deliver more quickly, test more quickly. And what it's doing is it's changing the way that code's being released. And that's changing the way that launches are being considered. And so that's a conversation that I'm having with a lot of clients is, there's this release cadence, this software, delivery cadence, if you will, where, new technology becomes available, new features become available. How do you need to communicate those to your sales team, your clients? But then if you want a big marketing event, that's probably a launch. And it's really kind of bringing together what you've done over the last, say, 6 months or maybe the last quarter and talking about it in a way that elevates it, right? It gets the market interested in what you're doing. But it's challenging, right? And I think what a lot of organizations need to remember is that press and analysts and customers, clients, and prospects can only consume so much. And so while you may be doing wonderful things and releasing cool new stuff every week or two, you can't go back out to somebody in the press, somebody at an analyst firm, or your customers and keep saying, "Hey, new." People get worn out and and it works against you, right? They stop paying attention, and you certainly don't want that.
Makes sense. So one of the benefits of AI is that it's making it a lot easier to produce campaigns, presentations, messaging. Does that improve the go-to-market execution, or does it create more polished activity without really solving the underlying strategic problem that you help companies solve?
No, it can absolutely help in accelerating the ability for product marketing to, one, is understand what's being released. And there's ways to, AI agents are great at inspecting the documentation that, your development team and your product management team are creating, and being able, and even, as more and more AI agents are being developed, AI can be used to inspect those AI agents and come back with, hey, here's what's new, here's what's changed, right? And then you can use that to create summary content. Somebody needs to be able to review that. That's where human in the loop comes into place. And then be able to distribute that out as appropriate, right? That goes into documentation for your clients. It might go into FAQs. It might go into a weekly newsletter in a way that's, your clients want to consume information. It might go into, a knowledge base that you put online that people can just use an agent to query. So AI can fit into this, and it can accelerate the ability of the product marketing team to deliver good content to clients, to sales, to the marketing organization for campaigns. But again, it starts with strategy. What's really important? Where do we want to put our focus? How are we talking to our clients in the market as a whole? That's a different approach than, hey, something new's popped up and we have to, right? We all know, marketing 101, and it really hasn't changed, is you got to tell somebody something 6 times before they actually understand it and hear it, right? And so with this ability to continuously change messaging, continuously change what we're talking about in the market, what happens is it creates fatigue because people can't keep up with it. What do you do? What is it? What are you talking about? What is it? What problem does it solve? And I think that's part of the, we see some of that, happen as AI gets to be more and more in charge, right? AI wants to talk about the cool new stuff, that we ask it to talk about. We as the humans need to understand how other humans pay attention to what it is that goes out and really focus on what is it we're trying to solve here? What's the message we want to take to our client? And, let's make sure that that works by trying it, by testing it, by getting feedback on it, not just by switching it up on them every day. Anybody who thinks that your clients are going to work to pay attention to what you do is going to miss out, right? Your clients need a really simple message of what it is that you can do for me. And then, you can layer into that. You can certainly use AI to add new messaging and new features as they become relevant, but you need to understand what your customers care about and what do they want to hear.
Well, it sounds like some of that focus is the basis of your no BS consulting approach. What does that no BS approach mean when you're working with executives in a company?
It means, really what I talked about, Dan, of let's talk about real problems and let's talk about how we can solve those problems, and let's start putting gates around the solution, right? I don't like to see open-ended projects. I came from an industry where there were a lot of open-ended projects. There was a lot of money going into technology that was going to ultimately solve problems that, was a lot of investment and not as much problem solving, right? And so for me, I don't like to see that. I really like to see customers be able to get results. And as I was talking to, again, these IT leaders, these people in IT organizations, so many of them just felt stuck in dealing with,
I'm sorry.
just dealing with like bad vendor contracts and coming in and really being able to help them solve some of those problems, help them get focus on what it is they need to do, and then what's the right way to go about doing it.
So I'm guessing that your clients already recognize that they need help and have an issue before they bring you in. But do you ever run into situations where your client has a preferred strategy or messaging or technology investment that you see as unlikely to work? And how do you communicate that to them if you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think the technology can work. It's how much is it going to take for it to work? And, that's time and money, right? Ultimately, time and money, because the technology solutions that are out there, you can get a team of, service people to come in, get it configured, consultants come in, help you figure out how to make it work, spend a bunch of time and money, it'll work, right? The approach I would rather take is, hey, instead of spending all that time and money to get, maybe get a little bit of a gain, is there a different decision you can make? Now, we have to understand that big decisions can be very hard, and there's cases where people have made big bets on technology, right? And when I say big bets, I don't mean, hey, we spent a bunch of money on it. I mean, hey, I invested my career in this technology. I, as a CIO, I had to go to the board and say this was the right thing. And it turns out we're not getting the results that vendor may have promised us. You need to remember that makes it very hard for that client, that person, to make a decision to change, right? Because that's basically them going back and saying, I made a mistake. I bet on the wrong horse. That's hard, right? So in those situations, we really have to understand not just the technology, but also the people. What are the problems they're trying to solve? And come up with solutions that will hopefully help them get to where they need to be without breaking the bank, right? And doing it in realistic window of time.
So when one of your clients tells you that they need an AI strategy, what are the questions that they should answer before they embark on that strategy and start discussing the platform to solve their issue?
Right. And I think that's a great question. And I need an AI strategy is that's a big conversation. So the questions I would ask are, okay, let's start with what are you using today, right? Let's face it, a lot of the core office productivity tools have big AI solutions associated with them. A lot of clients have invested heavily, in certainly Microsoft is predominantly out there, and most of the clients I talk to, Google and their workspace out there as well. And then there's other solutions, but Microsoft Copilot, is that going to solve the problems that you have? What problems are you trying to solve, right? That's where you get past, hey, is there a blanket AI solution to what are we actually trying to accomplish, right? The other thing is that rarely is a solution just an AI solution, right? There's a lot of existing technology that customers have that works really well, and AI can come on and add new levels of efficiencies. It can add ways to drive better optimization of processes, maybe new layers of automation. But it doesn't mean rip everything that you've got out, right? I think that's a very risky approach. And, the reality is not many clients are talking ripping everything out. What they are talking about is, do you go with a solution that's targeted at a very specific, kind of a niche approach, or one of these hyperscalers that comes in and says, we'll solve everything. All we need to do is throw time and money at it, right? So, for me, again, my approach, no BS approach is, what's a real problem we can solve? And if we can't talk about that real problem, then I just don't really want to have to get into it, because that's not my ICP, right? We talked about who's your ideal customer profile. Let Microsoft go in and talk to them about a giant strategy, or depending on who that client is.
So you recommend, I would assume, small, kind of narrow use cases to start deploying AI and building on it from there?
That's right. That's a great approach. And that's, the kind of organizations that, my focus is on AI strategy, how you can bring it into your organization. I work with a lot of, great providers that are focused on solving solutions in different areas with using the right type of technology. And those are the kind of folks that you can bring in to actually implement a solution, again, in a 30-day window, not in an open-ended, gigantic services contract, create some magic solution.
So to that point, I know one of your specialties is using technology within IT and employee service management. Where's AI already creating practical value in service delivery? What do you say?
That's a great question. And there's a lot of confusion and skepticism about it today. It's getting better, but again, the IT buyers are they're skeptics by nature. They're looking for ways to be able to manage the business that they've had to manage with the budget that they've had, meet the privacy, compliance, regulatory needs of their organization, and then grow, be able to be a partner in growth, which can be challenging, again, with the budgets. It's interesting, I've been talking to IT buyers for over 2 decades, and the problems are fundamentally the same, right? It's being asked to do more, the complexity of the technology environment that they're dealing with, and limited budgets, right? And so AI vendors often promise them a lot. We've seen a lot of things that have not worked well. The reality is now solutions are starting to come online. And solutions are starting to come online that I think are more relevant for the IT buyer, right? A lot of the focus was, and this is where I've spent a good part of my career, was focused on the actual interaction between an end user and the IT organization, and being able to use chatbots, automated AI to do that kind of engagement, so that the people that used to take phone calls or respond to emails can now go off and actually do the work. The reality is that a lot of organizations, the technology wasn't ready, they weren't ready, requires a lot of really good data to be able to avoid having to send a user to an actual live person. And you don't want to frustrate them with having the technology in the front end that just adds steps to their problem solving. So where I'm starting to see AI be able to come in and drive value is in managing AI, right? Is, again, when you think about governance, compliance, regulatory, governance, having AI that gives you the ability to start overlooking that is critical. Security space, AI can help quite a bit. In the operations management and the deduplication of events and alerts and the red lights that those folks deal with, AI can certainly help distill that down. But I think there's a lot of work and a lot of upside that AI will bring this market space. But it's early days, I would say. It's not, we're not solving gigantic problems. We're taking steps into solving problems and enabling these organizations to be able to start bringing AI in a way that they're able to monitor it, make sure that it's meeting the needs of the organization and not creating risk.
Yeah, and with the IT service platforms, again, I think there's a balancing act there that you touched on between reducing that human interaction and trying to reduce the number of tickets that someone has to touch and making it more difficult for the user to get through the process and get their problem solved. So that's definitely a balance that I'm sure you focus on when you're looking at that. I'm going to jump ahead to vendor selection. When technology buyers evaluate vendors, a lot of times there are numerous vendors that have remarkably similar claims. How should leaders approach that vendor assessment and their tool selection given that?
You've got to go do click down research, which I would say most of them are very good at doing, in my experience. What in the market that I came out of, especially the IT service management market, I worked at the vendor that was, by all means, the leader in that marketplace, the 1,000-pound gorilla, and delivered a very powerful solution with a lot of capabilities, right? And clearly, again, market leader, was that the right solution for everybody? No, right? It's a powerful solution, requires powerful management of it, right? And not every organization needs that kind of ability. And so what I saw was that there was this gap in taking the requirements that were coming in, right? What does somebody actually reach out to a vendor and say, hey, I have a problem in this area. How can you help me? Specific needs, right? And then the vendor, it's kind of what we talked about with us hyperscalers on the AI side, but the vendors come in and saying, hey, you're thinking too small. You should think of everything, right? Don't just change this part of your business, change all of your business, which can be a powerful solution for the right people. What I saw was that a lot of organizations got swept up into it. And, my approach is to really come in and really focus on what is it that you need to solve? How do you need to go about solving it? What are your customers, the businesses that support the IT organization? What are their expectations? How do they see you, right? There's a big front end process of gathering information and data and talking to different stakeholders and getting an understanding of how is this IT organization viewed? What can actually help them in being seen as a business partner, not as a business cost. And, the beauty of it is you see organizations transform, right? And it doesn't take a giant wholesale, change of everything you're doing. It requires looking at new ways to solve problems that you've had for a long time and probably implementing the tools that you already have to be able to do a lot of that. And then, hey, if we can layer in some new automation, maybe there's ways to leverage AI, great, let's talk about it. But let's solve those big problems first. And what I've had the opportunity is to have clients that they're doing changes where we would think on the outside that doesn't sound like you've made a huge change, but for them it was massive, right? They took a step in becoming a better business partner. Their people took a step in doing less, kind of the daily grind of tasks, doing things that for them were more thoughtful, required, learning new things on their end, and really kind of just breaking the mold of how they had been doing things and seeing that propel them forward and really driving changes in how they work with the business. And I think that's it's a huge step is how do we get you out from being stuck and getting those first couple steps going so that you can really see success, see progress, and do it in a way that, again, budget, time, let's really look at how do we solve problems soon, not in the future.
So speaking of the future, AI is obviously affecting everything, not only your clients, but your business and my business and how we do it. So as AI makes it easier to do things like generating content, select products, research markets, what services that people like us provide become more valuable and what becomes less valuable?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, this is rapid change that we're seeing, right? On the technology front requires us to be able to respond quickly. And, when I started my practice, I really thought my focus was going to be on the go-to-market side, right? My background in product management, product marketing, understanding messaging types of things. And what happened is I was inundated with requests from investment firms and startups to talk about market and talk about, exactly what you said. What are the implications of AI on, especially the IT space? So all of a sudden it's, kind of putting on a different hat, right? So thinking about marketing is one thing, thinking about, hey, here's what the market looks like is another thing. Fortunately, I've had the ability to experience both of those things in great detail. And then, these conversations with IT folks around helping them kind of make sense of what's going on and what conversations they should be having with their vendors has come up, right? So it's just being nimble and it's being able to quickly respond. One of the things that I like to do is use a lot of different AI solutions and see how they work for me. And I have my core bench of AI solutions that I work with and that I'm using to help me collaborate in the work that I'm doing. And it's interesting because, we talked a lot about creating, messaging and content and things like that. And the amount of work I do with my AI partners in creating messaging and content is significant. So is it faster than it used to be? Yes, it is. But the amount of iterations that we go through to get the message right is not insignificant. And you have to be, and that's, kind of going back to how do we look at AI, this human in the loop, right? If I went in and I said to, my AI agent, hey, go create a piece of collateral on this topic, it would come back and create something, put in Word, and I could ship it out. And it's likely to be junk, right? It's not going to be targeted at the people that I want to target. It's not going to have the information that I want. So again, I work a lot on that. And what I've done is built prompts, right? And I continue to build and extend those prompts. So I'm building out more and more agents that understand what do I actually ask. And so I have agents that are on the content creation side. I have agents that are on the editorial side. So it doesn't just get created, it goes through an editorial review, which is quite rigorous. And so it's interesting that I have, these different agents set up and to see how they're working and how, we work together to actually come up with the right product at the end. And I'm really happy with ultimately what we come up with, but it's not a, click in a, hey, go write me something about market dynamics, and it comes back with something that I would put in front of them.
Well, one final question. So assuming there's an executive out there that works for a company that would fit your ICP, and they're under pressure to adopt AI, but they don't have a clear use case or business outcome or measurement plan, besides what's David's phone number, what is the first question that the executive should answer before speaking with another technology vendor?
Well, again, it goes back to what we've talked about, right? And it's interesting because we are seeing organizations getting budgets for AI, without a result associated. And so that's a very open-ended conversation. And it's, let's get in and start talking about the business, right? And who am I talking to? Because if it's, if you're talking to a CEO, what are the problems that they're seeing? They're looking at business growth, right? They're looking at how do they get a competitive advantage. And, when you're talking to executives at that level, what you really need to understand is what is the thing that keeps them up at night, right? What's the number one thing? Let's get the first top three. We have the top three, then we need to figure out who helps them solve those problems, right? Who on the executive team? And then what does it mean to start being able to do that? But again, for me, it's how do we start narrowing the focus down, right? How do we get to something that we can deliver on in in that window of time? If they have a big AI budget, that's great, but I hate to see people waste money, right? Hate to see them waste money. So let's start focusing on what is that you're trying to solve. And let's get in there and start having those conversations, because those will start to break down where do you focus, right? It could be our ERP system doesn't work for us anymore. We need to put AI in place and radically change it. Why? What is it? Tell me more, right? We got to get into the details. What is it that's the problem, right? The problem is I have 10 ERP systems that don't talk to each other. So I have this huge manual process that's in between. That's interesting. So there's an application potentially for AI there. And, I know somebody who can come in and help you actually execute and deliver on that. That's not rip and replace your entire ERP systems. It's let's get them talking together. Let's automate these processes, and let's make it so that you don't have somebody doing, the multiple screen typing, looking at one screen, typing into the next, swivel chairing to try to solve your business problems, right? So you got to get into what is it that we're trying to solve? What is it that's going to keep that person up at night? And it might be that they just have a mandate to go adopt AI, right? And that's a blessing and a curse, right?
Exactly. Well, David, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you joining us today. One of the things that I think is clear from the conversation, technology on its own does not create business value just because it's powerful or new. And AI can dramatically increase what an organization can do, but leadership still has to decide what should be done, why it matters, and how success will be measured, and how to communicate that. So I know you help in all of those areas and more. If people want to reach out to you, David, how do they reach you?
They can reach me, David, at dcfconsults.com, or go to my website, dcfconsults.com, and you can see a little bit more about the services that I offer. And love to help anybody that thinks they could use my assistance.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for no BS interview. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you, everyone, for watching today. This has been the SmartMAI Consulting Edge Podcast. Thank you.